This is Tara Gronhovd with the Grounding and Growing Leadership podcast powered by Align, and this is episode number 9. Hey, we're back and talking about conflict again. This is part 2 of our conflict series. We know this can be a hard topic. We know that practicing healthy conflict resolution can be challenging because the only way to practice is with people, and that can be anxiety-producing for many of us. How we define success when we're entering into conflict really determines how we're going to react in the conflict. We're going to dive into that today. We hope you find this series valuable. We'd love to hear your feedback and questions on this topic. Welcome to the Grounding and Growing Leadership podcast, where everyone is a leader and leadership starts with you. I'm Tara.
And I'm Pamela.
Thank you for listening and inviting us along on your leadership journey.
We are so excited to welcome you back to one of our favorite topics that we want to talk about, which is conflict. This is part 2 of our discussion on actually growing through conflict. And it is possible. And we know that there's so much to talk about in this area because we are human and we disagree with things and people and sometimes even with ourselves on a daily basis. And so this is really an important discussion to have.
It is. And even talking about conflict, when we were just recording the first episode, I could feel my stomach starting to tighten a little bit. What are some of your physical reactions or responses to conflict?
Yeah, you know what is crazy? My stomach does the same. My heart definitely starts racing. So these are some of the common things that happen. Oftentimes we get a lump in our throats. We can hyperventilate a little bit and not feel like we are calm and relaxed. And that lump in our throat also comes from the fact that at the lower part of our brain, that is where tension lives. Sometimes for people, if you go into a chiropractor or a massage therapist, they will go straight to your neck, bottom of your neck and the top of your shoulders and start to press in, and you will feel it right away because that is where your tension is. Depending on that level, I can feel a little out of body. I get a little numb throughout even my legs and my bottom legs. Even if I'm sitting, it can feel like I don't feel present. Have you ever felt that?
Oh, yeah, out of body. And part of it for me is my mind starts racing.
Yeah.
And my mind starts racing in a couple of directions. It could be about the injustice of whatever I feel like is happening.
Yeah.
I'm an Enneagram 7 with an 8 wing, and that 8 wing likes to come out strong. And so that sense of like, how do I make this right? Or how do we make this right? Or this is wrong. So I'll get distracted by that. Or how do I make myself right? Which I don't love to admit, but sometimes it's how do I convince this person that what I'm doing or saying is the right thing?
Yeah. And you just spoke to what we talked about in the first episode, which is the reason for conflict, which is defensiveness.
Yes.
To defend our point of view.
Yeah. So I want to talk for a minute about how we define success in conflict. I think it usually gets defined in a couple of ways, depending on you and how you're wired. But one of the ways people define success is that if we don't have any, everything's fine. So the absence of it means that we're good. I'll talk to teams. I'll be like, we don't have any conflict. And I'm like, how long have you been working together? Because my guess is you do. It'll take longer to deal with it now because the team might be used to avoiding it.
Yeah. Or they are a fearfully avoidant attachment style. And what they have learned to do is just push that thing behind a door, like a door of their mind. They work really hard to keep that door shut because it may not be psychologically safe for them to bring conflict forward. And so they have a conflict about talking about conflict.
Yes. I think a lot of people have a conflict about talking about conflict. So the other way that I see people defining success in conflict is being, I win.
Yeah.
And that might be getting your way. And sometimes when you're entering into conflict on behalf of someone else, that feels justified. If I get to prove my points, then I've done something good for someone because I'm helping. But being right becomes more important than getting that connection.
Yeah. Being right over the relationship. I want to be right more than I want to maintain the relationship. And that's where I say you are then so wrong. You can yes, from your point of view, be right. But if that causes a relational fracture, if not being safe to have a different perspective and still maintain a relationship is a part of your point of view, then in my humble opinion, it's too costly. Here's where my strength comes in, Tara, because I am a very high connectedness and relator and strategic. I strategically lead through connection and relationships. And if I am fracturing a relationship, to me, the conflict cost me way too much. Even if I do feel like I still am right, I would rather be able to peacefully have different perspectives with you and still maintain the relationship than let that being right cut us off from one another.
Pamela, then I imagine you have internal conflict because you also have high beliefs. And so if a core value is going to be crossed as a result of honoring the relationship over the value that matters, then that probably causes internal conflict for you as well.
It does cause internal conflict. And again, depending on who and how close the relationship is, I would say that in that place of disagreeing a bit, we still maintain respect and honor for one another and love. And again, because of my belief system, love is a core value of mine, of all people, because of our humanity. So I have this level of love for humanity, and I don't want to break that for people. So belief is strong for me, but I know that we can still love one another while disagreeing. However, if you're not in a close sphere for me, it may be a place where our relationship is not going to be then as close because of my core values.
Yeah. And you have high relator along with your beliefs. So those levels of trust are real. And then your core values have to be aligned in order to have access to those inner circles of trust.
Yeah. And we talked about this in our boundaries episode. There are just some places that it's more healthy for me to live in a place of a proactive boundary based on what I believe. And so that doesn't mean that I ghost you or that I cut you out or that I block you. It means that we get to live in the same world of loving one another. But I also don't spend an incredible amount of time with you. That's not going to be life giving for me or for you.
I kind of balance between when I look at the disconnection stances, which we talked about last time. So just to briefly, they were, was it puff up or power over
Yeah. So that's the posture.
or posture?
Where we puff up, we get a loud voice. The second one is we collapse, we get small, no voice. We may still be there in person, but we have left the building as far as our brain. So we are not present. The third one is that we invade a situation or we seek to fix it and we're going to go after and hit it hard. And then the fourth one is that we truly distance, detach, and we do leave. And so we do avoid.
Yeah, so I can vacillate between a couple of those, kind of depending on the situation, depending on the people that I'm with, depending on my own states. I have high individualization and connectedness, and so I want connection. When I'm avoiding conflict, it's because I don't trust myself to be able to rebuild the connection and afraid I might break connection. And that's because I also have high command and self assurance. Sometimes when I finally do deal with it, it will build up. Then it is the posture or the puff up or the power over, and it's quick and it's emotional. And it can be probably intimidating for people. I've been told that before, especially when I was in a maybe more raw stage of life. And then if I don't trust that I can do either, I will just disconnect and avoid. So then I'll just detach if I can. It's also a tricky move for people with high connectedness because detaching is also disconnection, but it's just connection at my expense. So then it looks more like ghosting to people if you're not careful. Now you've created disconnection, but you haven't explained what's going on or why.
Yeah. Yeah. And in that place, then you have fractured from yourself, right? Because you see that as high connectedness. And there's a place at which that repair and that reconnection hasn't happened. And so that feels left undone.
Mhm.
there isn't closure on that. That feels almost like a relational weight that we are carrying that takes our breath away, actually takes way more brain space in our life. I'm going to cross over here and say this is where, if you haven't had repair and genuine forgiveness, that the person that you haven't forgiven takes up an incredible amount of space in your brain and time thinking about them way more than we want to realize. So just think about it. Who are you wasting your time thinking so much on? Sometimes that's because there needs to be either a point of reconnection or of forgiving and releasing both yourself and the other.
So, Pamela, I think about back to what we were just talking about regarding defining success. I really challenge or encourage people to pause and think about how they define success when it comes to conflict, because how you define success will probably determine your reaction. And one of the reactions is, I want everyone to leave happy. So, how I define success is we're going to have a conversation, but I want everyone to feel good about it. And that assumes you have the ability to control how other people show up.
That tells me that you're very codependent. Um, I just want everyone to be happy. And
Yep.
so I am going to accommodate.
Yeah, so you and I see that with teams all the time. There will be someone who is really great at bridge building and mediating, and they will often sacrifice their own needs or perspective in order for everyone else to leave feeling good. The challenge for that on a team is your voice matters and you probably represent other people. If you're a leader, you absolutely represent other people. And yes, you might say, I can handle it because I have thick skin or it's not important to me. But I really think about who you're advocating for and whether or not it really is important for you to bring your voice, because the solution is going to be more balanced when all voices have an opportunity and feel safe to be heard.
And so I want to refer back to our first episode on growing through conflict, working through the conflict charter. And we will have these notes in the show notes here as well. But being able to name what it is and then releasing the shame for how perhaps you have dealt with what it is. And shame being, again, self hatred at my expense. That narrative, that story that we make up in our head around the fact that we had a conflict, then to tame it, meaning then to speak it, to be able to say these are our natural points of tension, and then to reframe it. How do we grow through it? Here's what I learned about me. Here's what I learned about you. Here's what we're going to decide to do in the future. And so that's one way of working through conflict with that charter as a team. But also, we want to give you another tool here. And originally, I introduced Tara to this through talking through some of the things that I use with couples in counseling. And it's a tool called Thanos. And it is Fanos. And this is where that S coming back to success. Again, what do we measure success as we're working through growing through conflict? But this is a communication tool. And so, Tara, I want you to actually start through how you have used this with teams. And then I'm going to come on the other side of this to how we use this with individuals or couples or with friendships.
Yeah, absolutely. So Thanos was really created, as I understand it, Pamela, as a tool to help couple
Yep.
connect.
Yeah.
In a way that's meaningful, but brief. Doesn't have to take a lot of time.
Yep.
Because a lot of couples don't have a lot of time. And a lot of people in business working together, colleagues don't have time for long, drawn out conversations either. So I've used this tool. This is a great tool for two people who need high trust with each other.
Yeah.
Work closely together. So maybe it's two leaders. I've used it with business partners before, so that's powerful, but there needs to be a mutual respect. I'll just put that out there. There needs to be a mutual respect for this tool to be effective because there is a level of vulnerability with it. So F is feelings. So I'm going to give you some examples of what this could sound like.
Yeah.
I'm feeling a little scared, but hopeful about what's going on with the team. I feel overwhelmed by work and the schedule because we're short staffed this week. I feel determined to finish that bookkeeping project. I felt hopeful when we were brainstorming today, felt confused about what you were expecting of me in the meeting today. So those are all feelings. So we're sharing something that we're feeling. A is affirmation or appreciation. So this is where you take the time to show appreciation about something you've noticed in the other. So in your partner, in your colleague. So I appreciate that you took the time to have that hard conversation with that other colleague, like you said you would. I appreciate your accountability in that. Or thank you for always checking in with the staff and making sure everyone's okay, especially when I've been out of the office. So showing appreciation. N is for need. So this is what's probably I found the hardest for people to share is to really get clear about what their needs are. Typically, we don't stop to think about our needs until they haven't been met for a while, and then we just get resentful. Have we actually taken time to identify and express our need? An example of need is I need for us to have more frequent communication and time to ask questions. I need clarity and need to understand what you expect. That's an example of a need.
Yeah.
I need you to follow up when you say you've got something, I trust you, and I need to know what the resolution was. So you be more intentional to bring me back and talk to me about what happened.
Yeah.
And then ownership. I own that I reacted sharply when you asked about the details for that event. You did not deserve that. I apologize for my sharpness.
That owning piece, that being able to name something where we've missed the mark, that is one of the biggest ways to rebuild trust.
Yeah. And then the last one is either how you're defining success, or maybe it's a struggle that you've identified as a team and you know that this is something that you're working on together, right? Maybe you're working on your own defensiveness and you've got some accountability with each other and you're going to report on that. That would look like, I felt a tug to be defensive today when you pointed out that mistake in the team meeting, but I checked myself at the time and I hope it came across okay. I hope I showed up the way I intended, which was we are just trying to grow and mistakes are okay. That's owning that struggle. And so over time, that takes maybe 3 or 4 minutes for a person to report, and then the other person does it in return. And you don't have to have a lot of conversation. So it's not a time to give feedback, to criticize, to explain, to try and give excuses, to try and shame each other. It's just time to be heard and to listen.
Yeah. And those same needs of being seen, soothed, safe, and secure. A lot of times we use that word soothed and we think, we use that for a baby. Why would I need that in a team at work? But truly it's that climate control that you are being, instead of the thermometer that measures the climate, that you're actually being the temperature gauge, that you're coming in with the desire to be compassionate, to be empathetic. And let me just say, Brene Brown has a great definition of the difference between sympathy and empathy. Sympathy is that I feel sorry for you. Empathy is that I am being passionate with you, or I'm feeling the emotion of sadness with you. And I'm just going to be with you in it. And I'm not trying to fix. This exercise really then emulates both of those two things. So I've seen this happen within friendships, which is great as a communication tool, or also for marriages. Feeling, again, the power of language really sets us free. Because too often couples will say, how are you doing? How was your day? What do they say? Fine. And doesn't let me connect with you. The goal of being able to share these emotions is for connection. So when someone asks me how I'm feeling, again, there's this opportunity to be seen. And I feel I am celebrating today. That's awesome. Tell me more, which again, you can ask in these meetings, tell me more. But also, if something was hard, rather than saying sad, if my partner comes to me and says, you know what, I'm feeling dismissed or overlooked or ignored. Oh my goodness, tell me what's going on. Tell me more. That gives me so much more understanding of language to compassionately show up for them than just feeling sad or tired. That can be something that we're feeling, but I want to hear more from that. So this is a point of connecting. And the great thing about it is that when I'm working with couples, we give people a word list of over 100 emotions to be able to choose from. And it's so helpful to be able to see them on paper to choose it. And then with the couples then is I want to affirm you for. And it's the smallest or a big thing, but we're trying to get in the habit of catching our partner doing something good. So it can be as simple as I want to affirm you for vacuuming the french fries out of the van from whoever you got your Happy Meal from or whatever. I want to affirm you for filling up the car with gas, or I want to affirm you for buying sliced pickles for my sandwich because I love it so much. Oftentimes we just don't do those affirmations of goodness, and then we don't feel seen. And so again, that's a wonderful affirmation. The next one I have twofold. I either need you to know, or here's what I need. Because sometimes when we're beginning, it becomes more of I need you to know, or here's what I need. We're not married to a mind reader, but oftentimes we feel like when we get married that we should be with someone that's reading our mind. And boy, that's a really dangerous assumption. We need to be able to state it. And then if we're stating it, we also have to recognize within ourselves that I'm connected to my own sense of needs so that I can tell you what I need. And if someone needs to pause and take a few minutes to just think about what that is, then silence is golden. Sit there with it for a while so that you can discover what you need. And that can be as simple as, hey, I need you to know that I've got this really big meeting coming up and I need some time away from the kids for a couple hours. Or on the other side, it could be, hey, I need you to know that after that big meeting of mine, I'm just going to need to process it with you and just have you listen without trying to fix what went wrong. And then owning is pretty self explanatory. We've said it before, but when we are self aware and owning that, hey, I was snarky the other day, or hey, that thing that you asked me to do, I completely missed. And then you can say, go back through our tools. I can imagine the impact on you is this. I want to name it. I want to own it. Here's what I want to do differently next time. Even if it calls for, here's what I learned about me. Here's what I learned about you. Here's what I'd like to do differently. Depending on the extent of the infraction per se, it could be longer or shorter, but it just helps to own. And then the last one is the success, which can be celebrate the win. Hey, this could be something like we just worked through this, or we got our date night once a week, or we're winning that we made this financial goal, or that we saw our child do this certain thing, or we survived the holidays with our family. But that's the other thing we don't do well is to just celebrate. It's hard to measure relational wins. But when we have this communication tool and we start getting these wins underneath our belts, then we recognize that, oh my goodness, we're bonding and we truly are connecting and reconnecting.
It's been a really powerful tool with the partners or the business partners or the colleagues that have used it. I've had them use it for 2 weeks every day for two
Wow.
weeks just to get the practice of it and then to cut back a little bit and
Yeah.
maybe once a week or every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But this is particularly helpful if you really need to work closely with someone, like I said before, or maybe you need to rebuild that connection and you need to be reminded of the things you appreciate about this person. It gives you a framework for being intentional about that connection and that communication. In almost every business I go into where we're working on employee engagement,
Yeah.
which is really just about helping people feel seen, heard, and valued in their work so that they can show up excited and enthusiastic about the work that they're doing. In almost every company I go into, there is an issue around communication. And in fact, if it doesn't show up in the top 3 issues, then they're probably not getting good feedback because they're probably missing something or they're lying.
Yeah. And they're conflict avoidant. Yeah.
Conflict avoidant and they're just not saying something. But building that trust with each other is the number one thing that helps build communication and improve communication. And that's just connection. Then first step towards that is just spending time together and reminding each other that you have best intent and it helps you assume the best of the other person when you've taken time to connect on a daily basis.
Yeah, I love that. Walking through Thanos or even an abbreviated version of it is so important. But for couples, I even encourage them to call it their check in because then it doesn't feel so flowery with language because it doesn't have to be, but it could be. And so for the one who loves to talk a lot, They're excited about all of this. And the couple coming to me in that way, I might say to them, you know what? For a couple of weeks, we're going to put a timer on this. And you each have 2 minutes for each one of these things, and you can't go any longer. And that might help the other one to just diffuse. This doesn't have to be 2 hours. So I
Yes.
also just want to set that intention. It can be longer, but for those that are a little bit on different sides of how long I need to connect with you, that sometimes we do have to put those timers in place.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think timers help on the business end of things too, because we don't have all day.
Yeah.
So yes, we want to connect, but it doesn't have to take long. And I see a lot of businesses shying away from the investment of time to make sure people are connected, even though the dividend will far outweigh the time spent.
Yeah.
But they have some time to connect. But using a tool like this helps to make sure that connection is meaningful, productive, and timely.
Okay. So, Tara, I have heard you talk about the 3 different C's, or we have brought them up here. I am noticing the word communication. I am noticing the word connection, and then also the word conflict. And these 3 things feel very important to be in the same, here's another C, conversation at the same time. And so I know that there is a tool you have developed that we then can come in to help teams and individuals who work together through growing through conflict. What is that tool?
Yeah, we have a workshop called Growing Through Conflict, and that can be done on a small basis, but we've developed a 3-month journey for a team to go through together because these aren't things that you can go to a training and, oh, I've got it. I never have to worry about this again. I'm now a conflict expert. Check, graduated.
Right?
So we need an opportunity to really dig in around these concepts and practice. And it starts with digging into your own responses to conflict and defensiveness, and then talking about what it looks like on our team, and then an opportunity to practice that conflict charter, and then coming back for that reconnection piece and learning how to build reconnection if conflict does happen. So that's a 3-month journey for a team.
Yeah. So we will put in the show notes ways to be able to connect with us on that. And I highly recommend that journey is taken. Reach out for support.
Thanks so much for joining us today. We will have all of the resources in the show notes. We look forward to hearing from you. Please let us know if there's a topic you'd like us to tackle, or if there's a guest you'd like to see us highlight. We will soon be highlighting guests on the Grounding and Growing Leadership podcast. Have a wonderful week.
Come on.